still have a few minutes. But I'm ready to go. You folks are in for such a treat. I don't want to wait. Tell me when it's 10:30. Raise your hands the minute anybody. You got 10:30. Everybody's ready to go too, huh? Can they do videos? Can they take videos of this?
I don't think so.
You have a video for the school? And people could get on Weber's. Just snapshots? Not a video. Okay, no videos, please, but you can take a snapshot. They produced a video of what you're going to see. Is it available on the Weber State website? Yes. Okay. So what is the link? What's the website? Weber State Performing Arts. Write that down. And is it called Windows to Bach? Okay, so Weber State Performing Arts, Windows to Bach is what you're going to want to get a video of this. And it's well worth going to that website and getting it. Show it to your students.
Okay, it's 10:30.
Is it 10:30? Okay, here we go. My name is Cheryl Norman. I'm on the board of directors for MPNA, and it's my pleasure, my great pleasure, to introduce the group who is participating today. This is a Windows to Bach is a celebration of music, history, art, and dance, coached by Dr. Eugene Yang. Stand up as I mention your names. Eugene is in the back. Yay! Dr. Ralph Vander. Where's he? Outside. He's outside. He'll come back in. Yay! Dr. Carey Campbell. Musicologist. Professor Amanda Sowerby. And the artwork's by Professor Arthur Adelmann. He's not here. The pianists are Stephanie Aston, Stephanie Cragen. Can you stand up as I read your names? Okay, so don't clap until I read all of them. Stephanie Aston, Stephanie Cragen, James Fangel. Okay. Jessica Hendry, CJ Ish. Jared Jacquard, Ling Yu Lee, Fanya Lin, Zo Lu, Kesley Marchand, Nicholas Mon, Jonathan McDonald, Natasha Cruz, and Brianna Smith. And the dancers are Roxanne Polson and Jordan White. Give them a hand. You will be giving them a hand later as well. You're going to enjoy this so very much. Thank you for coming, and we'll start the program.
Hi all, I'm Carey Campbell, a musicologist at Weber Sate University, and I get to go first. The shadow of the French court of Louis XIV loomed large, even over Germany. Its extravagance served as a model to which many German aristocrats aspired. A veritable obsession for French court culture took hold in Bach's Germany. French became the language of German courts, and the French style of dancing became a symbol of social status and wealth. Dancing was a favorite pastime for the ruling class and was a way to project one's power, grace, and agility. An obsession for French dancing meant a need for French-style dance music, inspiring a horde of German composers specializing in exactly that. One of these, J.J. Froberger, from a generation before Bach, traveled Europe far and wide, absorbing musical traditions like a sponge, and brought them back to his native Germany. Through his compositions, Froberger established the working model for German-French dance composition. Since dances are typically quite short, they are grouped into suites, each movement a particular dance, in order to provide variety of tempo, meter, and style. This idea began in the Renaissance, when dances were paired, a slow dance immediately followed by a fast one, a duple meter dance followed by a triple time one, and so forth. Dance music, however, was kept strictly separate from so-called serious music, and each had its own practitioners. In Bach's time, however, the boundaries between the popular and the serious were beginning to loosen, and dance suites began to gain status as an art form. It was Froberger who established the Baroque four-dance corps of contrasting characters, to which other dances were added to fill out the suite. That corps was the Allemande, Courante, Sarabande, and Gigue. More on those later. Bach's employer in Curtin was a music lover, and, as a German prince, had a fascination for all things French, including dancing. Among Bach's duties at the court was to compose suites in addition to other instrumental secular music. Bach's employer was a Calvinist, and so he had no use for sacred music from his Kapellmeister. Bach never left Germany and had little association with other composers, but he learned both the French and Italian compositional styles by studying and arranging purchased sheet music and manuscripts. And through the work of previous German composers like Froberger, Bach had plenty of models. We really must clarify one thing. Bach's dance suites were listening music, not dancing music. By the time Bach was writing the suites, the Frobergian corps dances had fallen out of fashion and been replaced by newer ones. His suites, then, are more like reminiscences of dances rather than accompaniment to actual physical movement. Bach's dances are slowed down, stylized, and packed full of musical detail that clearly signals music meant for listening. As reminiscences of actual dances, though, Bach retained many of the characteristics that made each dance unique, though some of them changed quite a bit when filtered first through French court culture and then through the German appropriation. What we present here today, then, is multi-layered, multinational, and cuts across chronological barriers. First of all, we have Bach's Fifth French Suite, performed by the students of Weber State University. In order to get at what Bach would have had in mind while adapting these pieces as listening music, we present a pair of dancers performing the actual dance steps in French fashion, a visual representation of what Bach and his contemporaries were working from. This is a kind of live-action thought balloon. And as a third layer, we have works by 21st century American painter Arthur Adelmann. These works were inspired by recordings of the suite, and Arthur dedicated one painting to each movement. Dances inspiring music, music inspiring painting. What better argument for how the arts are truly integrated and how we all can learn from one another? The first dance is the Allemande, which is French for German. It is, in fact, an old German dance which dates back to the 16th century. But upon exportation to the French, it became slowed down, dignified, and in duple time. It's this French version that was then re-imported back to Germany. As is typical of Baroque dances, it's in two repeated sections. And this will be highlighted in our performance by alternating pianists. Like other dances, it also features an out and back harmonic plan. Since repeating music verbatim was considered bad taste in Bach's day, the repeat of each section will feature embellishments prepared by our performers. The subsequent dances will also follow this format. In the dance suite, the courante exists in one of two forms. There's the French version, which is moderately fast, majestic, and features hemiola. And then there's the Italian version called the current. The name current is derived from the French verb to run. The current features rhythmic evenness and rapid figuration in two-part counterpoint, all performed at a brisk tempo. In this suite, Bach clearly uses the Italian version, furthering the point that German taste was in fact a mixed taste. The saraband originated in the New World, brought back to Europe from Mexico as the zarabanda. In its original form, it was a breakneck, sexy dance accompanied by castanets. In fact, the dance was banned from Spanish ballrooms due to its alleged obscenity. When filtered through the French ballet stage, though, the saraband transformed into a majestic triple meter dance, somewhat like a slow waltz, but with a characteristic emphasis on the second beat. The next three movements are what Bach often called galanteries, separating them from the core movements that precede and the jig that will follow. The term can be translated as trifle, but it actually denotes an important aesthetic category, one meant to amuse in a tasteful, witty, elegant, courtly kind of way. Bach is rarely thought of as an amusing composer. He's most often associated with the stern, serious world of Lutheran church music and piano teachers. But nonetheless, these trifles serve among a few examples of Bach trying his hand at the lighter stile galant that was already beginning to supplant his own style and would find full flowering in one of his sons, J.C. Bach, and a little later would transform into the high classical style in Mozart. The first galanterie is a gavotte. Gavotte is a fairly fast, joyous French dance in triple time. It has a characteristic upbeat of half a measure and accents on every other beat. In fact, each phrase seems to begin and end in the middle of a measure. Bach's gavottes are not entirely typical, for the strongly accented rhythm is rare among French examples. The bourrée, which starts here. The bourrée also has its origins in France. It was a rambunctious peasant dance in 2 quick beats per bar, but this rambunctiousness is stylized via Bach's driving 8th note bass line, which supports a lively anapestic melody. In fact, the short, long anapests create a very strong sense of forward motion in this piece. The charming lure is a rare find among dance suites. It's again a rural dance which made its way to court. It's typically in slow triple time, emphasizing the first beat of the measure, and somewhat resembles the true French courant. I'd like to point out one aspect of Baroque performance practice that's particularly apropos to Bach's lure, something we like to call the 2/3 rule. In the first full measure, right hand, Bach writes an A appoggiatura to the main note G. According to contemporary treatises, an appoggiatura is given half the value of the main note. But when the main note is dotted, the appoggiatura gets 2/3 the value of that main note. So in this instance, the A would get 2 of the dotted half's 3 beats. It's a little ambiguous whether the tie, which would add an additional beat and a half to the equation, should be taken into account or not. If it is, then the A gets 3 beats and the G gets 1.5. I like the first option because it rhymes well with the proportions of the answering figure in the other hand. And we'll see which way our performers do it. That's what they get for asking my opinion. The usual way to end a suite is with a jig. A jig is a fast Irish-English dance. You're probably familiar with the English word jig. This enormously popular dance features athletic, springy movements fitted within the 2 big beats of each compound duple bar. Now that's a fancy way of saying that jigs are normally in 6/8. But notice that Bach writes this one in 12/16. Dance suites don't usually have or need tempo indications, since everyone already knew the speed at which they ought to go. And Bach here uses the diminution of the main meter to signal a faster tempo than normal. In addition, jigs usually begin with a brief point of imitation, which, of course, this being Bach, turns into a lengthy and elaborate 3-voice fugue. Bach here has adapted the details of the dance to fit what Bach, in fact, does best. The first 5 of the 6 French suites appear first in a notebook that Bach presented to his new bride, Anna Magdalena. Anna Magdalena was his second wife. The first one, the mother of his first 7 children, had died just a couple years earlier. Anna Magdalena was a singer, 17 years younger than Bach, who clearly had some keyboard skills. And Bach gave her a notebook in 1722 as a gift. He had already entered into that notebook a present for her, the first French suite. The other 4 that appear in the notebook were added over time, but instead of working out the details of the 2nd, 3rd, and 5th suites elsewhere and copying them very neatly into his wife's notebook, Bach instead composed them directly into the book, and they bear all the signs of active composition. Here's an unusually messy and ill-planned snippet from the end of the Louvre. Now you're not looking at Beethoven here, but this is extremely messy for Bach. You see that here at the end of the Louvre, Bach simply ran out of space, so he drew some staves and finished it out. There seems to be no definitive version of any of these 6 French suites. Even though we have Bach's manuscript, and I've been showing it to you this whole time, it's only partially helpful because all 6 suites exist in at least one other copy, usually made by someone else, and in all cases, these copies disagree with what Bach originally wrote. Sometimes measures have been added, passages have been changed, or movements added or deleted. So it's impossible to know whether these copies represent Bach's revised thoughts or someone else's whims. Some of the copies are rather close to Bach's original, and some are quite different indeed. Of course, in judging these copies, priority is given to those by individuals within Bach's immediate circle. The point here is that these works are in a state of flux, and no version is any more official than any other. I happen to find that exciting, not frustrating, for it highlights the fact that the music was once and still is alive, written by a real person, for real people to play, for real people. As a small point of fact, Bach never referred to this set of pieces as a French suite. And the first appearance of any reference to French in the collection's title dates from the late 18th century, long after Bach had died. Bach's first biographer popularized the title in 1802, and it sort of stuck. These French-ish suites also have an older cousin, written in Weimar around 1715 and published after Bach's death. They're called the English suites, but there's nothing particularly English about them. These titles, French suite, English suite, were probably marketing devices. Bach's so-called English suites are longer, more contrapuntally complex works and lack the suaveness found in the French-ish suites. It seems that Bach was consciously turning to a more accessible style with this French set, underscoring my earlier comment about the galanterie. In at least one instance, Bach used both the French and the English suites as part of his pedagogical program. H.N. Gerber was a student of Bach's and reported that in his lessons he studied the Inventions and Symphonias, the French suites, the English suites, and the 2 books of the Well-Tempered Clavier. It's fitting then that at this conference of music educators, we'll hear a portion of Bach's teaching program performed this morning by the very capable piano students of Weber State University.
As dance faculty at Weber State University, and I'm really happy to be here today. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Baroque dance. Baroque dance is the precursor to classical ballet and was established and developed in France under the court of Louis XIV. At this time, French culture was highly influential and fashionable in society, and the new style of dancing was no exception. Dances such as the minuet, sarabande, bourrée, gavotte, gigue, chaconne, and the French courant all share roughly the same vocabulary of steps. The step vocabulary was used in both ballroom and theatrical dance. In fact, courtiers danced alongside professionals in court entertainments. And if you are familiar with ballet, you will recognize many of the step names. However, the style of executing the steps today is very different from that in the Baroque era. For example, in classical ballet, the emphasis is very high up, while in the Baroque, the style is more rooted to the ground. Louis XIV was an accomplished dancer of the noble style, which was developed under his regime and later spread throughout Europe. At this time, French nobility were expected to be able to dance the noble style at formal balls as well as performing in court ballets. It seems rather strange now that during the 17th century, dancing had not only great social importance but also great political stature. It was not unusual for court appointments to be made based on one's dancing skill in the ballroom. From the book Dancing, The Pleasure, Power, and Art of Movement, Gerald Jonas writes, "By force of personality, by ruthless operation of the machinery of power, by clever manipulation of a system of rewards and punishments, Louis drew lords of the realm to Versailles and kept them there as hostages to ambition, forcing them to spend fortunes they did not have to keep up with the extravagant ways of the court. While the king was in residence at Versailles and no war claimed his attention, he hosted as many as 2 to 3 balls a week. The balls invariably opened with a brandel, in which the men lined up behind the king and the women behind the queen. And the company circled the floor one after the other. The order was so strict that anyone observing the brandel knew immediately who stood above whom at court. Following the brandel came more social dances, performed one couple at a time with all of the other guests around the sides of the room. People of the highest rank sat at one end of the room, and the dance was directed towards them. Dances of the noble style were stepped dances, with the partners moving across the floor, sometimes separately, sometimes holding one or both hands, often in symmetrical patterns. Each one, except for simple dances like ballroom minuets, had to be individually choreographed to a particular piece of music. This not only ensured that the dance was the same length as the music, but it also meant that the patterns, rhythms, and steps of the dance reflected or enhanced the music. For those who haven't seen Baroque dance, the first thing to remember is that even in social dancing, if a dance is for 2, that means there are only 2 people on the dance floor. The partners can't just stay in one area keeping to themselves. They need to cover the entire floor, but look as if they're dancing with each other. One element of a dance was a spacious floor pattern. Surviving floor patterns typically display a great deal of symmetry. For example, in the dances for 2, the dancers would often perform the same steps in mirror image or spiral about the center of the ballroom. Dances would often start with the partners moving from the back of the ballroom to the center towards the people of highest rank, then separating and turning to either meet or cross each other. And at the end of the dance, the partners would retreat back to their starting positions to take their bows. It's worth noting that the clothing was very different. Both men and women had very heavy court clothes for social dancing, and the women were further restricted, of course, by the corset and a wide, long dress. Today we have the choice about what to wear, and our dancers today, if you could come to the front, Roxanne and Jordan, are wearing costumes that only reference the traditional style. But the clothing certainly had a strong influence on the upright nature of the dance. I'm going to ask Jordan and Roxanne to take the stage, please. And at this time, I would like to ask if there are any volunteers in the audience who would like to come up towards the floor and ask all of you to stand up. And we're going to try a couple of steps, very small steps, don't be afraid. Dance is only a little bit dangerous. Come on, let's dance. Can I have a couple of, would anybody be willing to come to the front of the stage here with Nick? And I'm going to have, oh, there we go, some great bless you.
Yeah, go on.
Thank you.
Get on the stage.
Oh, on the stage. Oh, the very brave souls will fly up on the stage. Good. So I just want you to try a couple of very small movements here. So you have an idea while you're watching the performance of what the dancers are doing. You're a little bit more connected. Let's talk about turnout. If you stand with your heels together and your toes towards the right and left sides, increased turnout is what we have in classical and contemporary ballet. But if you bring your toes in a little bit to make more of a V position with your feet, this is what we had in Baroque style of dancing. So we had minimal turnout, just a slight reference kind of to the proscenium open towards the king and the queen. If you bend your ankles and your knees and your hips slightly, this is what we call a plie. Oh, lovely plies, people. And then lengthen your knees, and we'll begin, bend again, plie, just a slight bend. This is our Baroque plie, and good, everyone's getting their exercise here. And then we'll take a little bit deeper, go down. This is contemporary or classical. But so the range of motion, as time went on, the range of motion became larger in the body. Very good. If we bring our heels up slightly, we're in a releve. An eleve or a releve. A releve is down and up, right? And we'll lower the heels. If you lift your heels just slightly, I can see some people have taken dance before. Good. And come down. Good. Just a slight lift of the heels is what we had in Baroque. If you go way up high onto the balls of the V, this is what we have in contemporary or classical and contemporary. And of course, women go up to the tip tops of the toes in point shoes. Very good, and relax. If you take one heel and lift it and place it towards your standing heel, this is what we call a coupe, and this is a very common step or a position. And you have to use your balance. Yes, engage your core. Good. Very good. So this is our coupe. And try the other side, please. Just transition. Right? Can you put your balance? And very good. Right. So this was either a static shape or a transition step to go through the coupe. If we have our right foot front, left foot back in a cross position, feet on the floor, this is our fifth position. And if we just take a little slide forward or slide back, as the dancers will show, this is a glissade, and a glissade means to glide. Again, a transition step, transferring the weight from one foot to the other. Good. Very nice, people. And relax. Let's take right foot behind. We're going to do a pas de bourrée. Right foot behind. Pas means step, de, of, bourrée, pas de bourrée. We'll step behind, step side, and step front. Very good. Keep this very small. Step behind, step side, and front. Pas de bourrée, also a very common step in the Baroque era. Still today in contemporary ballet, we do pas de bourrées all of the time. I'd like for all of you to try the arms for just a moment. In Baroque era, the arms were held slightly away from the body. You could have one arm up, the other arm down. They would switch. Sometimes we incorporate the upper body, the shoulders, or the use of épaulement in the upper body. Right? And if you can picture the heavy constrictive clothing that they wore, they wouldn't have the range of motion that we see today in contemporary ballet. It's much more limited. But the arms do create a frame for the body. So I want to say, wonderful job in your dancing. Give yourself a hand. At this time, I would like to commence with our performance and ask the students to take the stage. Enjoy.
performance and presentation. We had so much fun putting this together for you. And we hope that you are able to take the spirit of collaboration and put all the things together to make music and everything else related alive and continue with it. We are able to take some questions right now if you do. Have any questions for either Amanda or Carey or...
Yes.
What size were the paintings?
The paintings,
Oh, this big. Yeah, and because it's too dangerous to transfer them, on airplane, that's why we didn't take them. However, we made about 100 cards for, all of you, so lots of you can
they
see
look like
some.
this here.
Yeah, but they're very elaborate.
Yes.
They are very much, and that's why it fits the spirit of the Baroque music and dance because of the intricate thing that Arthur has done with the paintings.
Yes, Peter.
I'm always baffled by the articulation in the G, whether to play it all staccato or all 2+1, or how to mix them so that it doesn't sound monotonous. If you go tari, papara, 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 too many, or ta-ta-ta-ta. Did you have any rules about that? Or is it...
Rules, no. And it may perhaps not be the answer that you want, but I think that making sure that we keep the two big beats, even though we have the diminution of the meter, keeping it as a dance. So if you're going I mean, who would want to dance to that, right? So perhaps mixing length of note in order to give that sense of forward propulsion, but also the two big beats in the bar.
Thank you.
Other questions? Yes.
I would like to hear from some of the performers about having seen the dances and how that affected their performance.
Performers, any reactions to how the dance might inform your Bach now? Is it not? We have a... Okay. Nick?
I don't really need a mic, but I'll use one. It was really neat to see the dances, and it really informed the way I took tempos. I felt like I played the saraband probably faster than I would have had I not had someone who had to hold poses. So it really informed tempos, and I loved watching the symmetry in the other dances when I was sitting down. It really informed the A-B, or the AABB phrasing. So it was really helpful with tempos and collaborating with the dancers. That was great.
Yes.
I know that the Bach was more listening than dancing. I have a question for the choreographer. The Shi seemed to go on forever for those four dancers. Would a Baroque dance ever have lasted that long?
No, not with that kind of what we refer to as in ballet, petit allegro refers a little jump. And the jig that was choreographed for them would not have gone on that long. But there's always an upside, increased stamina.
I'll take one from the back. I saw some hands in the back. Yes.
I know, I assume this is choreographed. How close is the choreography that you're doing to the court dances as they were danced by regular people, whatever, court
It's pretty darn close. We did our research, and I have to say that Roxanne and Jordan were co-researchers with me, and there's a whole other group of dancers too that have been learning these dances at Weber State. So they were definitely co-researchers in terms of just finding dances, and certainly not all could be found on video or in texts. And the books of the day from the Academy of Dance in Paris from the 1700s, it kind of told you what the steps were, but not how to do them. Yeah. And so we took some artistic license, artistic liberty as well. But we'd like to think they're pretty darn close, but not exact. But they're not historic reconstructions.
Yes.
Are we to assume then that none of these dances were with a whole group of pairs, but just one pair at a time?
Yeah, very often the couple dances were just two on the floor.
Even the minuet?
Well, no. Some of those would be done as whole groups. Yeah, but many of the couple dances were done just two on the floor.
Yes. dancer would like to say something.
Sorry. Also, the ballet that they performed in the court was more for the king and queen and for spectators, such as yourselves, versus some of the court dances that were danced just for balls and stuff like that. So there is a slight difference between the Baroque ballet and then the court dances as well.
One more question?
I noticed sometimes when people perform these, they'll take a slight pause at the end of the section, especially at, going back to repeat. But because people were dancing with them, there were no pauses, they just drove straight through. Is that to accommodate the dancing? Is it more common with the Baroque pieces, with not playing the dancers, to take that pause? Is that a decision made between the dancing or
I don't think we had put that into the consideration. It's only because, like Professor Campbell said that it's not really meant for dance originally, and then so in order to hear the music in the completeness, that's how we decided to do it this way. Yeah.
Thank you for coming. Let's give them
Yeah.